In a world shaped by endless conflict, two names come to define an entire era of war. Once sworn enemies, they now stand side by side, facing a future neither ever imagined. Elria reflects on how this is the first time she's fought alongside Reed, and he quietly agrees, recalling the days they stood on opposite sides of the battlefield. As a massive creature looms before them, Reed raises his sword and declares that now, in a world 1,000 years into the future, they fight together. The story traces back to a vast land scarred by constant battles. On one such battlefield, soldiers struggle to advance after a bridge is destroyed, until one of them recognizes Reed as the hero of Altain. At that moment, Elria appears and confronts him, refusing to let him continue his reckless destruction. Reed realizes that she has come because she heard he would be there. Hovering in the sky, she reveals that she has brought powerful magic, and Reed responds with anticipation, wondering whether this battle will finally settle their long rivalry. Elria counts it as their 629th encounter, reminding him, as she always does, while he admits that he forgets every time. Though he calls himself an idiot, he knows he cannot show weakness on the battlefield, as he bears the title of hero. Elria confidently says she won't lose either as a sage. Within the Altain Empire, a powerful nation known for its military strength, Reed Frieden is a legendary hero who fights in countless battles without ever being defeated. In contrast, Elria Kaldwin is a sage from Begalta, the nation opposing Altain. She uses powerful magic and spreads magical knowledge to change the course of war, eventually taking control of her country. Time and again, the two meet on the battlefield, never resting and never holding back, fighting as if each clash holds meaning. Elria remains the only person against whom Reed can fight with his full strength, yet their rivalry cannot last forever. A conclusion is inevitable, and when that moment arrives, only the strongest will prevail. The scene shifts as the commander confirms with Lyat whether the sage is truly dead, doubt heavy in his voice. He questions the reliability of the report, and Lyat answers calmly that the information is extremely reliable, having come from an urgent message sent by a spy who infiltrated Gelta. The commander grows quiet and admits that he always believed he would be the one to die first. A royal decree is issued and sent to His Excellency Frieden. When Frieden asks about its contents, he speaks bitterly, calling himself a useless old man now that the sage is gone. Lyat denies this and reads the decree aloud. With the sage dead, Frieden is ordered to seize the opportunity, lead the entire army, invade the neighboring country of Vegalta, and finally end the long war. Lyat acknowledges the opportunity but feels overwhelmed, knowing that both Frieden and the sage never wished to use their power against the powerless, which is why Frieden chose to fight her in a one-on-one battle. Lyat insists that the death of a great sage who wished for peace should not be used as a reason for war, but instead mourned. Frieden listens and agrees, saying he will pass the message on to her. When Lyat asks what he plans to do, Frieden replies that he's just going for a walk, adding that he doesn't need to dress for war just to meet a friend, and leaves his sword behind. The scene shifts to the border between Altain and Vegalta. Frieden runs alone, and the people watching cry out in disbelief as they recognize him as Reed Frieden of the Altain Empire. Some demand to know why the hero has come to invade their land. Frieden recognizes a young woman named Tiana and asks if she has come to take her late master's place. When she demands an answer, he replies that he has come only to beg the sage's favor and that this is his sole purpose. The scene moves to the royal capital of Vegalta. Guards step forward to block him, but Frieden apologizes and asks to be allowed through, saying he does not have much time left. He states that he will die the way he chooses once he is done speaking with her, and asks them not to stand in his way. He reaches Elria and sees her lying still. He calls her name, wondering if she is truly dead and whether she might suddenly return to life. He speaks of the disciples she raised, admitting their strength, but says that compared to her, it was difficult to hold back without killing them. He calls Elria incredible and says that even now, many people still look up to her. Overwhelmed, he admits that they never decided who was stronger, but that he cherished fighting her for over 50 years. He reflects that if their roles had been different, they might have become friends. The memory shifts to her standing before him, determined to settle who is stronger. He falls beside her in a final, fading moment. Reed then awakens to a quiet morning presence. Confused, he realizes he is no longer an old man, but a small child. He remembers dying only moments ago, yet now everything has changed. A woman beside him gently calls his name and offers him milk, referring to it as her special milk. Disoriented, he tries to understand who she is, where he is, and what kind of place he has awakened in. 18 years pass after the beginning of his new life, and time moves forward. Reed works in a quiet forest alongside other men. He steps forward to cut down a large tree while the others move back, and when it falls, admiration spreads among them. His presence brings relief, and they are impressed that he can perform such work without using magic. After finishing, Reed pauses and considers where to take the wood he is carrying. At that moment, his attention shifts to a squirrel identified as a new species. The discovery excites the men and leads to talk of reporting it, while Reed feels the calm of the moment and wonders if this peaceful life will continue. The scene shifts to a beautiful palace where Elria urgently searches through a newspaper and recognizes Reed, convinced that she has finally found him. Later, Reed returns home from the forest and greets his mother as usual, only to be met with her concern. She explains that a noble from the royal capital came looking for him and requested that he go to the village chief's house. Reed treats the matter lightly despite her worry, believing that nobles are usually those who fight magical beasts using magic, and that it has little to do with him. Few things surprise him anymore, as he has awakened to a world where 1,000 years have passed. The Altane Empire has fallen, the land has become the Vigalta Magic Kingdom, and magic is now commonplace, leaving him mentally far older than his appearance. Reed decides not to keep anyone waiting and heads to the village chief's place. As he walks through the village, people question him, and rumors spread quickly. Attention gathers around a privately owned magic vehicle, signaling the arrival of a high-ranking noble. Anxiety rises when villagers rush toward him, but the village chief intervenes. He explains that the visitor is a distant descendant of the royal family of the Vigalta Magic Kingdom. Though he does not know the reason for the request, he reassures Reed that he will not abandon someone from his village. At the destination, Reed reaches the door and is suddenly confronted by Elria. Her appearance shocks him, creating a sharp contrast between his formal behavior and her familiarity. His careful use of honorifics clashes with her expectations, and confusion follows as memories and identities fail to align. Eventually, Reed acknowledges that he is the same hero she refers to. She becomes gloomy, noticing his tone. Elria recognizes him fully and identifies herself as Elria Caldwell of Vigalta, 2 centuries old, while Reed admits he has little to confirm her identity beyond her name and origin. Uncertainty lingers, so Elria proposes a fight. Reed warns her about the limits of using magic nearby and leads her back to his workplace. There, he shows her his life in the village, plowing fields, chopping wood, and hauling heavy loads. He chose this life because he cannot use magic, though the strength from his previous life still remains. Elria acknowledges this and unleashes a powerful burst of magic. The energy surges forward, but Reed steps in and meets it with his fist, stopping it head-on. Reed admits that he does not remember how many times they have fought, while Elria remains calm, knowing she was always the one who kept count, and feels glad that the person before her is truly Reed. He reflects on how unexpected their reunion is. Elria recalls that she believed he would exist in this world as well after being reincarnated, even without proof. When he wonders how she found him, the answer lies in a countryside newspaper article, where a picture of a rare squirrel led her to recognize him through intuition. Their discussion turns to reincarnation, understood as inheriting memories and abilities from a previous life. Elria refers to it as reincarnation magic, something that exists only in theory. She admits she never used it and does not know how it can be performed. Reed realizes that she understands the outcome but not the method, and she acknowledges that even she has limits as a sage. She notes that true reincarnation would have preserved her former appearance, which is not the case. Reed considers that she may have been reborn as a human rather than an elf, explaining why their ears now match. The focus then returns to Reed's inability to use magic. He recalls his childhood magic aptitude test, where the examination device broke the moment he touched it, leading officials to judge him incompetent. Rather than cling to magic and cause trouble for others, he chose a quiet life in the countryside. Although magical beasts still exist, this life feels far more peaceful than his previous one. Elria remembers that Reed was once a hero, but Reed considers that title something that belongs to the past. Elria reflects on that past and acknowledges that Reed was once a hero, though he no longer claims that role. He admits that he is not as strong as she is now, without denying her strength. In the past, only a mage was allowed to fight. Elria then expresses her desire to marry him and declares that he will be her fiancé. Reed is caught off guard and resists the sudden certainty. Elria explains that being closely related to the Caldwell family, a branch of the royal family, would allow him to take the Magic Academy entrance examination, regardless of his magic aptitude. By proving his abilities, he could become a mage. Reed questions whether this is cheating, but Elria denies it, insisting that Reed fought her for over 50 years and was once called a hero. She cannot accept that he was overlooked simply because he cannot use magic. Reed says he is glad to hear her feelings, but insists that before anything else, they must settle who is stronger. He remains confident that she feels the same way. recalling how their roles as hero and sage meant that either of them losing could have caused a country's downfall. This is why they never fought without restraint, despite always fighting earnestly. Reed expresses that if wishes could be granted, he would never run or hide, and would always accept Elria's challenge. A carriage arrives in the village, and the waiting attendants stand quietly outside while the villagers gather to watch. Inside the house, the village chief sits with tension on his face as Reed steps in, unsure why he has been called. Reed mentions that nothing is wrong, but informs the chief that he will be traveling to the royal capital with the Lady of Caldwin. Meanwhile, Elria hides her face in embarrassment, overwhelmed as she repeats to herself that she asked him to marry her. When Reed walks out with her, both appear in the doorway together. A crowd quickly forms around them as the villagers cheer with excitement, realizing that Reed is leaving for the royal capital. Some boys insist that Reed should introduce them as well. Others shout about how beautiful the Caldwin princess is, and one child proudly calls himself Reed's friend. Reed feels the crowd pushing too closely and reminds everyone that they cannot reach the carriage like this. He reaches his hand toward Elria to guide her through. The village chief steps forward and urges everyone to move back. With the crowd finally clearing a path, Reed holds her hand and leads her to the carriage. She thanks him softly as they step onto the vehicle together. Inside the vehicle, Reed sits with quiet disbelief, feeling how unexpectedly everything has changed. Elria sits beside him, still flustered from earlier, remembering her slip of the tongue. When he calls her name, she responds with a shy reaction, and he realizes her gentle and timid nature remains the same, even after reincarnation. She covers her face and apologizes. He then brings up his inability to use magic. Elria thinks carefully before explaining that the problem lies in the nature of his magic power. Ordinary magic behaves like water, flowing naturally through the magic circuits, while Reed's mana resembles stone and does not flow at all. Forcing it only breaks the circuit. Reed realizes this clarifies why the testing device broke during his aptitude exam. Elria continues her assessment, noting that for him to use magic, she would need to design a new theoretical formula and build an entirely new magic circuit suited specifically to him. When he wonders how long that would take, she recalls that it took her a full century just to create the foundation of her own magic theory. Reed accepts this and finds it remarkable that the mystery he carried for 18 years is solved so quickly. Elria then wonders if he ever truly wanted to use magic. Reed admits he simply wanted to know how it feels. She reassures him confidently, certain that even if he did use magic, he would not be able to defeat her with it. Suddenly she becomes quiet and lightly tugs at his shirt. She calls his name and expresses her gratitude for accepting her engagement proposal. Reed reacts with mild surprise and looks at her, realizing how she had acted earlier. He realizes she skipped every step and jumped straight to proposing marriage, all because she wanted to give him a chance to fight again. Reed acknowledges that her reasoning is correct. Engagement is the only way for someone like him, a magicless commoner, to qualify as a mage candidate, and it also gives him a path to investigate their unusual situation. He brings up the greater concern. Both he and Elria reincarnated 1,000 years later, and he doubts such timing is accidental. If someone caused this, they need to uncover who and why. Even if it turns out to be chance, he believes it must still be investigated. He also notes that he cannot act freely as a commoner and does not want Elria to shoulder the burden alone. He remembers that Elria's family wasn't part of the royal lineage. Elria replies that Princess Tiana inherited the Caldwin name, making the family an official branch of the sage's lineage. Reed realizes he is now engaged to a daughter of such a distinguished family. Elria stays calm and reassures him that he will manage. Reed then wonders what she sees in him as her fiancé, especially since they were enemies in their previous life. Elria answers without hesitation, showing no discomfort about their past, and makes it clear she would never propose if she cared about old rivalries. Reed reflects that he trusted her for the same reason. They share a quiet moment and thank each other. He then admits he has never experienced an engagement before. His former life was spent on battlefields where death was constant, so he had refused all marriage discussions. Elria listens and accepts this. Reed shifts the subject and wonders whether stories about him survived over the past 1,000 years. Elria reacts awkwardly, and he grows curious, assuming he is remembered for brutality. She avoids giving details and insists the truth is different from what he thinks. Before he can ask further, the vehicle stops, and she announces that they have arrived at her home. Reed steps out and looks up at the palace, overwhelmed by its size and elegance. Elria walks ahead, and he follows her inside. Her father, Gallian Caldwin, waits for her and immediately focuses on her late return. He notes that she must have something else to say since she slipped out alone again. Elria admits it, and Gallian appreciates her honesty. She responds that she left a note and informed the staff, and he acknowledges that she handled it well. She then introduces her fiancé. Gallian instantly rejects the idea, but Elria reminds him that the fiancé is already present. He expresses surprise, and she confirms it before presenting Reed, who greets him respectfully. Gallian studies him and identifies him by name, then orders him to leave. Reed calmly refuses. Seeing his determination, Gallian invites him inside instead. Reed accepts. Gallian admits that he would never personally approve of giving his daughter to someone with an unknown background, but he is not the head of the house and cannot decide the matter alone. As they walk deeper inside, Alicia, Elria's mother, appears. Alicia asks about the commotion. Gallian explains that Elria brought home her fiancé and warns Alicia to step back because she is being too loud. Alicia introduces herself as Alicia Caldwin, the head of the Caldwin family. Reed introduces himself as Reed Frieden. Alicia examines his name and notes that she has never heard of his family. Reed explains that he is from a small mountain village in the Arliath region and is a commoner, so it is natural that she would not know his background. Alicia remarks that for someone from the countryside, he conducts himself very well. Reed answers that he simply presents himself with the respect appropriate when addressing the family's head. Alicia compares him to Elria and notes that he behaves far more calmly than her daughter. Elria reacts cheerfully, but Alicia clarifies that this was an insult and expresses concern for her daughter's future. Elria accepts it and announces that she finally found Reed. Alicia instructs Reed to raise his head and be at ease, and he answers with a polite acknowledgement. She states that rejecting someone who has shown proper respect would disgrace the Caldwin name, so she chooses to welcome him as a guest. Reed then asks whether Elria and Gallian should be present, but Alicia reasons that they are unsuitable for this discussion, and speaking privately will make things smoother. She wants to understand what is happening and how it all began, and she warns that simple excuses will not work on her. Reed says the engagement exists, so he can use the Caldwin name and status. Alicia immediately realizes Elria came up with the idea and says she needs no further proof. She already trusts he is the one Elria has been searching for. Reed looks confused, so Alicia elaborates. She remembers Elria as a small child suddenly declaring that she wanted to find someone named Reed Frieden. When asked why, Elria only shook her head and insisted he existed. Alicia once dismissed it as childish imagination. Still, Elria always seemed unusual, gifted in magic, quiet even as a baby, and prone to staring at her mother with fearful eyes. She had awakened in a world 1,000 years later without knowing anyone. Yet she continued searching for Reed without any real basis. Reed listens in silence as Alicia concludes that if he truly is that Reed, she will approve the engagement. He asks if she is really willing to entrust her daughter's future to a man of unknown origin based only on Elria's belief. Alicia answers that it is her daughter's wish, and as a parent, she sees no reason to deny it. She then asks for his own thoughts. Reed reflects that Elria once stood as his only equal and that time has kept them apart for far too long. He never forgot her, just as she never stopped searching for him. He wonders how she sees this peaceful world now. Realizing she still lives in this era, he admits he wants to remain by her side. Alicia listens and gives his answer a passing mark. Reed finds the judgment harsh, but she counters that words mean nothing without action. She sets a condition: he must qualify as a magus at the same magic academy as Elria and prove himself during his time there. When he asks how, she tells him to rely on his strength and notes that her expectations are high if Elria chose him. Alicia then calls for Gallian. When he enters, she orders him to test Reed's ability and determine whether he deserves a place at the Magic Academy. Gallian agrees. Reed steadies himself and decides he will evade every attack and land a single blow in return. He adds that no one can blame him if the building ends up destroyed. Reed enters a new room with Alicia and Gallian. He looks around, unsure what kind of place it is. Alicia tells him it is a state-approved magic training facility where even non-mages can take part in combat. She mentions that Elria trained there in the past. After instructing Gallian to properly evaluate Reed's skill, she leaves to speak with Elria. Gallian faces Reed and signals the start of the test, inviting him into a formal match. Reed confirms that the earlier conditions still stand, and Gallian agrees. If Reed survives his attacks for 1 hour, he wins, since Gallian doubts he can land even a single hit. Reed understands the implication. Anyone who hopes to marry into the Caldwin family must stand on equal footing with the strongest modern mages. Gallian adds one more condition. If Reed manages to strike him, he will earn the right to call Gallian daddy. Reed quietly notes that he would rather say father-in-law. With that, the match begins. Galleon moves first. His attack slams into the ground, but Reed slips away in time. Galleon notices his sharp instincts and increases his power. Reed answers with a solid blow that forces Galleon back. As the fight continues, Reed becomes aware of the room's durability and realizes this is where Elria once trained. Galleon, feeling the weight behind Reed's strikes, remarks that it feels like facing Elria herself and urges him to stop holding back. Reed apologizes and prepares to act in earnest. The scene shifts to a quiet room where Elria waits, restless. Her thoughts drift to the conversation between Reed and her parents. A knock breaks the silence, and Alicia enters, saying she wants to talk. Elria immediately brings up Reed. Alicia lets out a small, teasing laugh and says that Galleon is keeping him occupied. She then raises a more serious point, whether Elria truly believes Reed is the person she has been searching for. Elria answers without hesitation. She feels as certain as she possibly can. He is the same Reed she once knew. Alicia admits she never expected such a reunion to happen. Elria confesses she had her doubts as well, but now he stands here with her. Alicia gently presses further, wondering if Elria's feelings run deep. Elria openly admits that she loves him. The words come out clearly, though her confidence wavers for a moment afterward. Alicia picks up on it and lightly teases her. Elria explains that she did not always see him this way. Only at the very end of her previous life did she understand her feelings, that she wanted to see him again, to see his smile, and that if fate brought them together once more, she wanted to tell him she loved him properly. Alicia notes how distant their perspective sounds, as if everything belongs to another era. Elria quickly clarifies that she is not hiding her past life, but she wishes to keep it as something shared only between herself and Reed. Alicia accepts this and promises not to pry further. Elria thanks her. The conversation shifts again. Alicia wonders whether Elria actually confessed, considering she jumped straight to a marriage proposal. Elria admits she never managed to say it. Alicia sighs, half exasperated, half amused, and remarks that while she knew her daughter could be awkward, she did not expect her to skip such an important step entirely. Elria explains that the proposal slipped out before she could say what she truly meant. Curious, Alicia mentions Reed's response. Elria leans forward, eager to hear it, but Alicia refuses to reveal anything and insists she hear it from Reed directly. She adds that accepting him, and even letting Galleon train him, might prove entertaining. That remark suddenly unsettles Elria. She turns anxious and questions what Reed and her father are doing. Alicia answers calmly that she asked Galleon to assess Reed's abilities before approving the engagement. Elria's expression changes at once. She warns that her father has no reason to hold back, and that Reed, despite being unable to use magic, possesses overwhelming strength. Her father, she insists, could be the one in danger. Alicia freezes, caught off guard by the claim. At that moment, a deafening explosion shakes the house. Alicia and Elria rush toward the training room. Smoke pours from the entrance, and debris litters the ground. Both call out in alarm. Reed's voice comes from above, confirming he is unharmed. Elria quickly assures him that she and her mother are safe. Reed then asks if they happen to see Galleon fly past them. Elria confirms it, her panic rising. Reed admits he tried to restrain himself but used what he considered reasonable force after being told not to hold back. Alicia takes in the destruction and calmly wonders if this display is sufficient proof of his ability. Overwhelmed, Elria declares that the man she loves is unquestionably the strongest. A month passes, and the Caldwin estate lies in ruins. Reed spends his time in the remaining library, searching for any mention of Altaine or the hero Frieden, but finds nothing. Frustration builds as even such a prestigious household holds no records. Elria approaches, carrying a letter addressed to him from his family. Reed hurries over, recalling that he had informed his mother about the engagement. The letter reveals her disbelief. She writes that while he claims to be engaged to a lady of the Caldwin family, she assumes it is a joke. Still, she says she will play along just to see his father's reaction. Elria looks at him with curiosity, and Reed tells her that his mother thinks he is teasing her. In the background, the village mayor has even requested souvenirs from the capital. Elria realizes Reed has never visited the capital before. He mentions that Alicia has been teaching him proper manners and etiquette, though he suspects she still holds a grudge over the destroyed mansion. Elria brightens and suggests they go shopping. Reed repeats the word, uncertain, and she clarifies that he needs proper clothes for the entrance exam. Otherwise, no one will take him seriously as her fiancé. Alicia appears, praises the idea, and encourages them to treat it like a proper date. Reed changes and rejoins Elria. She immediately notices that he borrowed her father's clothes. He admits it, and she approves with a playful remark, calling them Daddy's clothes. Reed feels uneasy about asking her father for anything after the damage he caused. Elria reassures him, complimenting how he looks while suggesting they can find something that suits him even better. Together, they head into the shopping district. The streets bustle with life. As they eat, Reed enjoys the food and remarks that it differs greatly from anything he had 1,000 years ago. Elria recalls how rough their meals used to be. Reed smiles and calls those days fond memories, and she agrees, adding that what matters most now is sharing moments like this together. Reed notices a crumb on her nose and points it out. As she reacts, Elria remembers her mother's advice: confess to him and ask him yourself. Before she can act on it, she bumps into something and stumbles. Reed steadies her, and she assures him she is fine. Recovering, she says she wants to show him something and leads him onward. They stop before a large building. Reed lifts his gaze, taking in the Magic Academy where they plan to enroll. Elria adds that she could have joined at 12, but delayed it while searching for him. She offers a quiet apology for the inconvenience. She adds, almost as an aside, that she avoided enrolling at the same time as the princess, and even the king tried to persuade her with sweets. Reed finds the story amusing. Standing together before the academy, she admits it feels strange to think they will attend side by side. Reed responds that everything depends on passing the exam first. After a brief pause, she wonders if he ever grew close to anyone in the village. Reed answers calmly, with a faint smile. Considering both his lives, he feels far older than those around him, more like they are children or grandchildren. Throughout all that time, he says, his thoughts remained fixed on her, just as she never stopped searching for him. Elria listens, her expression softening. She admits that while she once enjoyed fighting him, she also longed for quiet moments like this. Their engagement, she says, truly makes her happy. She raises her hands toward him and gently places herself in his care. Reed accepts without hesitation and promises the same. Their hands meet, light but certain. He speaks her name softly, and she meets his gaze with calm warmth. They arrive at the entrance of the Magic Academy, and the first thing Reed notices is the enormous crowd gathered there. People from different countries fill the area, and the lively atmosphere makes him excited. It really feels like the world's best Magic Academy. Around them, several students recognize Elria and whisper her name in awe. Elria becomes overwhelmed by the attention and hides behind Reed, clinging tightly to his back. He points out how close she is, but she insists that everyone is staring at her, so she wants to stay hidden. Walking becomes difficult, and Elria even asks if it would be easier if he carried her on his back. Reed knows that would embarrass her even more. He understands that people stare mostly because she is cute. Elria repeats the word to herself and suddenly asks whether Reed thinks she is cute too. Reed hesitates, but she insists that it is very important. Finally, he smiles and admits that he finds her so cute he wants to brag about her to everyone. Elria promises to do her best so Reed can proudly speak of her. When he tries to free his sleeve, she refuses, calling it her lifeline and holding on even tighter. They arrive before the academy staff. Reed mentions that they were sent by the House of Caldwin. The teacher immediately recognizes Elria Caldwin's name and warmly greets the girl believed to be the sage's reincarnation. When her attention shifts to Reed, she admits she knows nothing about him and assumes he must have ties to the Caldwin family. Elria responds by hugging his arm and declaring that he is her fiancé. The teacher congratulates them and assumes Reed must come from a noble house, but he calmly states that he is only a commoner. The teacher hesitates, unsure how to respond. A sudden voice from above cuts through the moment, warning everyone to stay alert. A heavy impact follows, sending a gust of wind across the area. A beautiful girl descends, landing gracefully after releasing magic. Reed, Elria, and the teacher all turn toward her. The teacher identifies her as Rufus Lillis from the Celios Federation, a nation known for coexisting with magical beasts. She adds that Celios specializes in summoning magic, where social standing depends on the strength of one's summons. She continues, noting that although wars have ceased, nations now compete through performance at Vegelta's Magic Academy, the birthplace of magic, as a display of influence. Reed remarks that this sounds like a proxy war among students, and the teacher agrees. She adds that Rufus represents Celios and is called the Dragon Princess because she commands all 4 dragons. Reed finds that impressive and gestures for Elria to come closer. Elria casually mentions that she can use summoning magic as well. Reed shows no surprise and says he expected as much. She goes on to say she can handle most other forms of magic too. Reed smiles, asking her to demonstrate someday, and she eagerly promises to show him something even greater. They move on to the examination area. The task is straightforward. Deal as much damage as possible to a device within the time limit. Elria studies it briefly, then requests a higher difficulty. The teacher hesitates, while Reed gently advises Elria not to trouble the staff. Elria insists the current level is too easy. With a resigned sigh, the teacher adjusts the test. A training beast suddenly appears. Reed tenses, but Elria reassures him that it is only a practice imitation. The teacher confirms it was modeled after a real creature. Satisfied, Elria steps forward and tells Reed to watch closely. She dashes ahead, sword in hand, wanting to impress him. Raising her power slightly, she overwhelms the imitation beast in a dazzling display of magic and skill. When it ends, she looks back at Reed expectantly. The teacher collapses in shock, while Reed calmly notes that it was even more spectacular than before. He pats Elria's head and mentions that, for greater impact, he removed all protections and barriers from the target while leaving the spell's strength unchanged. Elria beams at the result, and Reed praises her sense of flair. At the same time, he wonders how she stays so composed after using such power, recalling that her magic was even greater 1,000 years ago. Elria identifies the technique as a Tier 10 spell, the highest level, and points out that only special mages can usually perform it. Reed turns to the teacher and wonders what would happen if he used something like a field of scorching flames. Panic spreads across her face. She warns that magical flames require equally powerful magic to extinguish. Reed accepts that answer and decides it will work for his evaluation. He steps forward, spins, and snuffs out the flames himself. Then he announces that this is how he would deal with it. Elria remarks that his punch remains as impressive as ever. Reed rubs his arm, noting how different it feels without his old sword and armor. Elria gently reassures him that it is still more than enough. His strength has not faded. Nearby, the teacher mutters to herself as her communication device begins to ring. She answers and receives instructions from the headmistress, requesting both Reed and Elria. The scene shifts to the headmistress's office at the Royal Magic Academy of Vegelta. Headmistress Elise Rammel addresses them firmly, telling them to restrain themselves on academy grounds. She focuses on Elria first, mentioning that the king had already informed her of Elria's extraordinary talent, which she could sense even from her office. She warns that such overwhelming spells could put others at risk and instructs her to limit herself to Tier 5 or below. Elria agrees without protest. Elise then turns her attention to Reed, clearly puzzled by his presence. She admits she cannot make sense of how someone like him exists. Reed offers another apology, though he still seems unsure what to say. In frustration, she drops her head onto the desk, remarking that his answer does nothing to clarify things. Reed leans toward Elria and quietly comments that elves are not supposed to age, yet the headmistress looks even younger now. Elria covers her mouth and explains that elves typically stop aging between 15 and 20, so appearances can vary. She adds that it may be unfortunate, but it is normal. Reed speculates that Elise must have stopped aging a bit too early. Elise immediately lifts her head and demands to know if they just called her small. Regaining focus, she questions whether what Reed used earlier was magic. He replies that he cannot use magic at all. She presses further, demanding to know what it was, and he answers simply, "It was just a punch." Elise drops her head onto the desk again, unable to process it. She pleads with him to avoid displaying his true strength at the academy. Reed says he can hold back, though he cannot promise to conceal everything. Elise panics, muttering that he will be the end of her. Reed then mentions that the Caldwin family required him to prove himself at the academy. He says he can restrain himself, but he cannot risk losing his engagement with Elria. Elise admits Alicia already warned her, and she now realizes she underestimated him. She offers a compromise. Reed may act freely during the entrance exam, and afterward, he can show some of his ability, but nothing like the destruction from earlier. She makes it clear that she will not tolerate a repeat. Afterward, she comments that it feels strange to meet two people named Elria and Reed. Reed wonders why. Elise explains that the elves have passed down an old story for generations, one she heard from her grandfather. Elria stiffens. Reed shows immediate interest, asking whether the story involves them. Elise clarifies that it is not about them directly, but about a hero from 1,000 years ago. She adds that elves still remember what that hero did after the sage passed away. Reed reacts sharply, and Elria urges him to stay calm. He presses for details, believing the story might reveal something about their past. Elise hesitates, unsure if it truly matters, but Reed insists. At last, she relents and shares it. The tale speaks only of how deeply the hero and the sage loved each other. Reed repeats the headmistress's words in disbelief when she reveals that the hero loved the sage. Elria reacts with the same shock. The headmistress continues the tale exactly as the elves have preserved it. Despite belonging to opposing factions, the human hero and the elven sage wish only for peace. For more than 50 years, they repeatedly clash, each preventing needless suffering for their own people. During that long conflict, the sage eventually falls ill. When the hero receives the devastating news, he forces his way alone through Vegalta's royal palace. By the time he reaches her resting place, his body is already on the brink of collapse. The headmistress emphasizes that he goes there for one reason only, to bid the sage farewell before dying. Elria listens, overwhelmed, quietly convinced that such devotion can only be described as love, and she imagines the sage would have felt joy knowing how he felt. The headmistress explains that elves have built many stories around this legend. Reed lifts a hand in gratitude, but he notices Elria looking faint and signals that they need to leave. The headmistress briefly checks on her, then concludes the meeting, reminding both to keep their power under control while on academy grounds and congratulating them on their enrollment. Outside, Reed reflects that he is not upset by the story. Elria admits the tale is extremely popular among elves and that people eventually began speaking of the hero and sage as if they were a pair. She blushes, worried that telling him earlier might have troubled him. He wonders if she believes he did everything exactly as the story describes. Elria hesitates, and he gently taps her ears to regain her attention. He explains that the elves recorded most of the story correctly. Elria reflects on his journey after her death. Reed confirms it. He remembers how he forced his way through while enduring attacks without striking back. Reed clarifies that he could not kill young Tiana merely to reach her, so he accepted the blows while moving forward. Her thoughts drift toward his final moments, and she wonders what words he spoke before dying. Reed recalls the past. He reflects that they never decided who was stronger, yet the 50 years spent fighting her were the most enjoyable years of his life. He starts to express a deeper feeling, but the memory snaps away. In the present, he abruptly brushes the moment aside, claiming that he likely only moved his mouth like a fish. Elria freezes in disbelief, unable to accept such a ridiculous explanation, and keeps trying to draw out the truth. Reed avoids answering and shifts their focus toward their next duty, reporting their successful enrollment to her parents. He walks off while Elria hurries after him, still desperate for the truth he refuses to reveal. When they arrive home, both parents welcome them warmly and congratulate them for entering the institute. Elria expresses thanks, and Reed follows politely. Alicia then turns serious, reminding Reed that since they will now live together in the dorms, she entrusts Elria to him fully. Reed wonders what she means, and Alicia lists her concerns. Elria is extremely shy, struggles with expressing herself, lacks ease in social settings, and faces additional challenges that may trouble her at the academy. Elria releases a quiet sigh as Reed listens. Suddenly, Galleon calls Reed's name with force, prompting Reed to stand straight. Galleon admits that the request is heavy, but still urges Reed to look after Elria. He worries because she only feels comfortable with a very small number of people and may struggle if left alone. Alicia watches him dryly, noting that this is his sober tone. Galleon adds one last warning from a father. Touching Elria before marriage will lead to consequences far beyond scolding. Reed understands completely, aware that the worst possible outcome could be death. Alicia looks relieved that he grasps the seriousness. She gently reminds Elria that in some matters, she herself may need to take the first step. The next day, the scene shifts to the Vegalta Institute of Magic. The headmistress stands before the assembled students and offers formal congratulations to Reed and Elria, expressing hope that they will achieve their goals and dreams here. Staff members then distribute keys to the dormitories. Reed receives one labeled for a shared suite and freezes for a moment. He wonders why the rooms are not separated by gender. The staff mentions that in modern times, engaged or married aristocrats often enroll together, so shared rooms are the norm. After decades of peace, the arrangement has become standard. Reed processes this and checks whether Elria is comfortable with it. Elria welcomes the arrangement, more at ease staying with him than with a stranger. Reed remembers Alicia's request to take care of her, while Elria insists she can manage some things herself. Inside the room, they pause, surprised by its comfortable and elegant interior. Elria mentions that she can store mana in the magic items, so Reed can use them as well. Reed's hunger grows after the long ceremony. He checks the kitchen, considering what to cook. Elria watches with curiosity. Reed recalls that he learned to prepare simple meals during his camping days in the army. Elria's memories resurface, hunting rabbits near battlefields and gathering food to survive. Reed is surprised, but she continues recalling how she was not treated as battle-ready when she first enlisted and had to forage for plants and fruits. Reed remembers similar struggles. His army avoided boiling water to escape being detected by her, so he once squeezed water from grapes with his hands to stay hydrated. Elria immediately shares the sentiment. The juice tasted refreshing, but stained their uniforms terribly, especially hers, which were white. Reed compares their outfits, recalling how his black uniform hid stains better, though she once found him by smell alone. Elria laughs softly, remembering how she tracked him through that scent. Nostalgia settles between them, and Elria suggests recreating the simplicity of the past by cooking a plain, old-fashioned meal. Reed wonders if she truly wants such simplicity, but she believes nostalgia will make it delicious. She also wants to cook together. They prepare their meal side by side. Elria quietly reflects that she has not cooked with someone else since childhood in the elf settlement. Her mother once praised her efforts, even if she never received praise for anything else afterward. Reed remarks that she is now so admired that legends exist about her. Her mother would be proud. The thought overwhelms her, and Reed gently places a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Elria wonders what Reed was like as a child in his past life. He reveals that he was always alone. His frail body suffered constant illness. He spent much of childhood bedridden. In the harshly divided Altine Empire, poor children were expected to become soldiers, but his illness made that impossible. His family viewed him as a burden. Frustrated, he trained fiercely whenever a fever lifted, collapsing again and repeating the cycle. Over time, his body transformed into a powerful one, stronger than anyone in the village. He recalls initial joy, believing people would finally accept him. Instead, they called him a monster. Even his mother adopted the word. Eventually, the village sent him away with wandering mercenaries. The mercenaries pitied him at first, but when they saw him tear through enemies with overwhelming strength and survive every battle, they began to fear him as well. He kept fighting, hoping to find someone like himself, but never did. Eventually, after enough victories, people began calling him the hero. Reed reflects on how unpredictable life can be. Elria listens with her hands cupped over her face. Deeply moved, she gives him quiet, heartfelt encouragement, returning the support he once offered her. She reflects on how praise warms her. She remembers how people in the past admired her and sought her guidance, calling her exceptional and insisting she is a genius, things she never recognized because she lived most of her life alone. She then looks at Reed with tenderness, reminding him that he is no longer alone because she is with him. Whenever he works hard, she intends to praise him, and since her age across 2 lifetimes exceeds his, she feels it natural to support him. Reed's expression stuns for a moment before softening. He offers a faint, grateful smile in return. He thanks her with playful formality, calling her Madam. She blinks once, and her entire expression trembles, ears twitching, shoulders shivering, her embarrassment so visible that Reed cannot hold back his laughter. Elria ruffles his hair in flustered panic until he gently raises his hands and assures her he understands. Afterward, they turn toward the bedroom, realizing it is meant for 2. Elria hesitates, then quietly asks if he is comfortable sharing the bed. Reed agrees, as long as she is comfortable too. Elria nods, saying she is, provided he is as well. Reed mentions that he sleeps like a log and barely moves, though he might turn once or twice. Elria confesses that, half awake, she occasionally does silly things without meaning to. Reed offers to sleep in the living room if that would help, but she immediately feels unsettled. She admits she would feel lonely if he were not beside her, and she gently asks that they share the bed. Reed assures her she could never bother him. As he settles into the room, he mentally pictures Galleon's stern face glowering at him to maintain discipline as he falls asleep. Morning arrives with the soft ticking of the clock. Reed wakes and slowly realizes that the alarm pressed against him is not the clock at all, but Elria curled tightly beside him. She nuzzles into his warmth, holding him with both arms. He gently pushes her back, reminding himself that he carries the mind of an old man despite his young body. He tries to wake her, but she only shifts closer, so he urges her more firmly. Half awake, she mumbles that a bath might help. Reed encourages her to go while he prepares breakfast. She hesitates, then quietly insists that she wants him to come along. When she dramatically slumps onto the futon, he relents and agrees to escort her so she does not fall asleep again. Inside the bath area, she sits in the tub and stares at him with sleepy confusion. She tugs on his collar with trembling hands, revealing the silly behavior she mentioned earlier. He tries to step back, but she clings tighter. With a quiet sigh, he settles on a compromise. He will hold her hand while she bathes, but nothing more. When she begins undressing, he stops her and hides his face beneath a towel. She wonders how he can see like that. He calmly tells her that the hero does not rely on sight to sense his surroundings. She finds this impressive. He offers his hand and guides her into the warm water. As she relaxes, she becomes aware that the comfort she feels comes not only from the bath, but from his presence as well. Her fingers tighten around his, and the moment settles into a gentle quiet. Later at the institute, Reed appears exhausted. Elria watches him with concern, though she remembers nothing of her earlier actions. Together, they enter the classroom. The students immediately stand in awe of Elria's presence, whispering excitedly about sharing a class with the reincarnation of the sage. They recall her Tier 10 exam in hushed tones. Elria gestures toward Reed and credits him with greater skill, which quiets many of the curious stares. Some students draw closer, intrigued by the rumor that he cancelled a Tier 10 spell. Others suspect he must be connected to the House of Caldwin. Reed steps forward and introduces himself with a polite expression of gratitude. He admits he is a commoner and hopes to earn the Caldwin name one day. Several students respond positively, praising the idea of recognizing ability over birth, though a few remain doubtful and question whether a commoner could truly nullify such a spell. Reed accepts their doubt without issue. At that moment, Lord Farrig of Verminant enters the room. Reed recalls Alicia's earlier warning. The Verminant family rivals the Caldwins in status. Farrig possesses exceptional mana, and he would rank first if Elria did not exist. She had also described him as arrogant, spoiled, and cruel, urging Reed to put him in his place if given the chance. The memory fades as the present unfolds. A hostile student accuses Reed of insulting the Caldwins and claims a low-born person should not stand within the institute. Reed responds by stating that he passed both the written and practical exams and received the headmistress's approval. The student continues in an exaggerated tone that makes him sound oddly like an elderly man. Reed notes this, then advises Farrig to stop before things escalate. Farrig's companion warns him that provoking someone tied to the Caldwins could harm their own house, but Farrig dismisses the concern. Reed ends the matter by revealing his engagement to Elria. Shock ripples through the entire class, and Farrig looks utterly devastated. Reed guides Elria toward an empty seat, suppressing a grin as he takes quiet satisfaction in Farrig's humiliation. Elria comments on his harshness, and Reed replies that reckless behavior like Farrig's can endanger allies. She begins to understand why soldiers from Reed's former nation fought so boldly. As they search for a place to sit, a friendly student invites them to join him. Reed introduces himself, and the student gives his name as Wiesel Blanche. Elria recognizes the surname, and Wiesel mentions that his family produces magic gear, including the staff she uses. She expresses her gratitude and asks him to thank his sister, who crafted it. Wiesel adds that his sister had been very excited about the commission. Elria then wonders why he chose the mage course instead of becoming a magic artificer. Wiesel says he values direct experience and wants to understand what mages truly need from their equipment. Reed praises this approach as fitting for the Institute's goals, and Elria agrees. Wiesel admits their approval sounds unusually convincing. Curiosity soon leads him to Reed's magic gear. Elria answers on his behalf, stating that his mana breaks all magic circuits. Startled, Wiesel asks to test it. He hands Reed a durable piece of gear he crafted himself. Reed touches it lightly, and it breaks instantly, along with Wiesel's glasses. Wiesel collapses in disbelief. Elria clarifies that Reed's mana is incompatible with regular magic. Wiesel cannot explain the complete physical break and decides he must study the phenomenon through repeated observation. He wonders how Reed gained such power, but Reed only says he has forgotten, as it happened long ago. Before Wiesel can continue, Reed turns his attention to a girl hiding behind a table. She rolls out, complaining about the hard surface. When threatened with security, she panics and hurriedly introduces herself as Millis Lambert, a 17-year-old from the border village of Norbarg, whose only companions were sheep. She says she arrived on a scholarship and desperately wants human friends. Reed leaves the decision to Elria. Elria accepts her energy and welcomes her as a classmate. Millis nearly cries with joy, proud of the introduction she spent all night preparing. Reed then asks why she had been listening in on their conversation. Millis admits that the other students seem too difficult to approach. She cannot imagine speaking casually to nobles and pictures herself using stiff formal greetings, which embarrasses her. Reed suggests she simply talk about the number of sheep she has sheared. Millis takes offense, especially after learning that Reed is also from the countryside. He strongly rejects the comparison and calls Norbarg a backwater. Millis demands to know where he is from. Elria answers that she and Reed come from Alarias. Reed proudly lists its lumber, oranges, and newly discovered squirrel species. Millis trembles as she tries to defend Norbarg by mentioning its meltwater and sheep, but Reed points out that she has repeated the sheep again. Overwhelmed, Millis breaks down, convinced she comes from the middle of nowhere and will be alone forever. Elria steps forward and gently offers her friendship. Millis freezes, eyes wide, then leaps into her arms with overwhelming emotion. Reed catches them before they fall. Millis grabs Elria's hands and shakes them in gratitude, overflowing with joy. She celebrates the fact that she has finally made human friends. Reed joins her group as a fellow countryman, and Wiesel also welcomes her. Millis trembles with happiness, thrilled that she can now list humans among her friends. They wait for the teacher to arrive, but the class grows restless. Wiesel and Elria gently pat Millis, even as she protests being treated like an idiot. Reed reassures her by pointing out that she managed to find her way to class. Before anyone can guess why the teacher is late, a massive explosion tears through the classroom wall. Students are thrown through the air as dust and debris scatter everywhere. A woman steps out of the smoke, brushing rubble from her clothes. She sighs in relief, convinced she has arrived just in time, and briefly notes that Elise would have scolded her for being late. She surveys the stunned room, smiles with confidence, and introduces herself as the instructor for the term. The scene shifts to the classroom as sudden excitement spreads through the students. Almakinos walks into the classroom and instantly draws admiration. She is a champion-ranked mage known for defeating disaster-level Titan mana beasts alone with Titan-tier magic. Alma, a living legend, will be their instructor. The students whisper about her recent royal order to eliminate a dragon nest. Alma calmly explains that she already destroyed it days earlier. She states that she was appointed to the institute by the king and the headmistress. As a former student herself, she understands how everything functions. She explains that freshmen are divided into 8 classes of 40 students each. At the end of every year, an individual evaluation is combined with the class evaluation. Only if the total crosses a specific threshold will the entire class earn mage qualification and graduate. She warns them that class scores matter just as much as individual talent because teamwork is a major part of a mage's work. When she asks a fluffy-haired girl to describe a mage's duties, the girl answers that mages deal with magic criminals and dangerous mana beasts. Alma expands on this explanation. She says that mages also guide civilians to safety, secure evacuation routes, rescue stranded people, and respond to many unpredictable situations. They often work in small teams, though sometimes they operate in units of dozens. Farag steps forward and introduces himself as a user of Tier 7 spells who has trained since childhood. Alma replies that his background sounds impressive. The response confuses him until she hints that she might begin by breaking a few bones. Farag immediately panics as Alma moves toward him in an instant. Another student confidently raises her hand. Alma notices her calm demeanor and asks her name. She introduces herself as Illyria Caldwan. Alma acknowledges the restriction placed on her by Elise, which prevents her from using spells above Tier 5. She assures Illyria that she will adjust accordingly. Illyria responds that Alma should not hold back and even wonders if she should be the one holding back instead. Alma attacks, but Illyria blocks effortlessly. Alma studies the glowing spell and notes that it disperses both physical and magical attacks. She identifies it as an advanced technique. Illyria confirms that she has more techniques available and asks if Alma has any specific requests. Alma instructs her to fight as though it were a real battle. In return, she promises to test how many bones she can break. Alma calls out to the class. Farag immediately urges everyone to move unconscious or injured students away because the shockwaves may cause harm. However, he refuses to leave because the match has become too interesting. Some trainees agree and begin moving people. Another trainee admits that fear has left their legs frozen. Illyria steps forward. Her spell expands behind her like wings of light. Alma stares in disbelief because lower-tier spells should not be capable of resisting higher-tier ones. Farag is equally confused. He notes that Illyria is controlling dozens of spells simultaneously, yet spells made only from mana should not be able to cancel stronger magic. Red agrees and is baffled by the same contradiction. Annie proposes a theory. She suggests that Illyria may be using spells to construct other spells. The nearby trainees react with shock. Alma explains that Illyria originally invoked more than 1,000 spells using mana. The dozens visible now are only the products of those initial spells. They continuously construct new spells in a process she identifies as polyaggressive expansion. This allows Illyria to overwhelm opponents through sheer numbers. Farag asks Reed whether he can see all of it. Reed confirms that he can. He says he has watched Illyria for as long as he can remember and cannot look away from someone so straightforward and radiant. Alma attacks again. Her strike fails once more. She admits that Illyria is impressive but is still holding back. Deciding to fight seriously, Alma announces a call to march known as Dead Man's Brigade. She warns that if Illyria wishes to challenge her flag, she must be prepared to risk her life. Reed reacts sharply and demands to know where Alma learned that line. Illyria's expression darkens. She says that only one person in the world is allowed to say those words, and that Alma has now given her a reason to question her. A trainee whispers in confusion. Reed comments that Illyria's reaction must be connected to Alma's words. Another trainee turns toward Reed to ask a question but discovers that he has vanished. Reed suddenly bursts forward and destroys Alma's giant skeletal construct through raw force alone. Farag is left completely shocked. Reed lands and apologizes for interrupting. However, he says that he could not remain still after someone stole his line. Alma studies him closely and recognizes him as the other special student. She asks how he managed to knock away her magic without using a spell. He introduces himself as Reed Frieden and says that he will answer her question if she answers his. He explains that he did not recognize the damaged flag at first, but the line she used confirmed it. He then asks why she is waving Altair's war flag. Alma brushes aside the question. She claims she does not know what he is talking about and sees no reason to answer if he refuses to answer her earlier question. Suddenly, Elise's voice shouts through the bell. She demands to know what Alma is doing and accuses her of using a Tier 10 spell against students. Elise reminds her that the bell was intended for support, not reckless attacks. She also threatens to be furious if Alma breaks it, while Melissa can be heard crying in the background. Alma sighs and says she understands. She turns to Reed and suggests that they continue their discussion later. Reed agrees, noting that their match has been interrupted. Alma then addresses the class once more. She tells them that if they train hard, they will one day be able to perform feats similar to the one she demonstrated. She encourages them to do their best. The trainees whisper among themselves. Some say her power feels godlike. Others admit that their earlier confidence now seems meaningless. A few even compare their own spells to simple party tricks. Alma reassures them. She reminds them that they all earned their place at the Institute and should not give up before their training has even begun. She promises to make them stronger than anyone if they follow her lead. Finally, she instructs them to wake any unconscious students because they are about to begin the most important mage training of all. She then announces their first task. They will run until they drop.
Here I am, know it's been a while.